So for those who have just joined, I'm Shilpita Mathews. I'm a trustee at Operation NOAA, and I'll be chairing today's event. As you know, every year, Operation NOAA holds a supporters event, which is an opportunity for us to share more about our work, hear from inspiring Christian speakers on climate and the environment, as well as explore specific environmental topics that are of interest. This year, we are exploring alternatives to fossil fuel violence, listening to our global neighbors. We'll have our brilliant speakers this morning who will help us to reflect on not only how burning fossil fuels are the primary cause of global heating, but also on how fossil fuel companies fuel violence around the world. Listening to our global neighbors' experiences will help us better understand why transitioning to renewable energy and stopping all new fossil fuel developments is a peace project, a way that we can live out Jesus's command to love our neighbors. We're honored today to welcome Dr. Svitlana Romanko, Bishop Manuel Ernesto, and Revd Dr Rachel Mash, who will share their experiences of people in Ukraine, Mozambique, South Africa, as well as from around the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. As fossil fuels fund the Russian government's violence against Ukraine and fuel violence throughout the continent of Africa, it's a critical time to listen not only to scientists who say we must effectively cut global greenhouse gas emissions by half by 2030, but also to our global neighbors. After we hear from our three speakers, we'll also have a question and answer time. So please do put any questions in the chat as they occur to you. Following the talks, as well as the Q&A session, we'll then get an update on Operation NOAA's work before taking a short break and starting our workshops, which will last a total of 40 minutes. You've each been assigned a workshop today based on your preferences and also according to space and what we had available in each workshop. We're really pleased to welcome Christian Climate Action and the Stop Cambo, Stop Jackdaw campaign to our supporters event, who will be leading two of our workshops today. And we're also really thankful to our other workshop leaders, many of whom are Operation NOAA staff and trustees, and you might know or be friends with from other spaces. Finally, after our workshops, we'll close this morning's event with an opportunity to financially support our work and end this time in prayer. So without further ado, I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Svitlana Romanko. Svitlana is a Ukrainian lawyer and environmental activist who was previously the Zero Fossil Fuels campaign manager for the Laudato Si movement. Svitlana is now working for Stand With Ukraine. In her previous work with the Laudato Si movement, Svitlana partnered with Operation NOAA to coordinate our global divestment announcements. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Svitlana has spoken forcefully on the need for a global transition to renewable energy and on the ways in which fossil fuels are financing the Russian government's violence and aggression. In the last several months alone, Svitlana has written for the Los Angeles Times, the National Catholic Reporter, the New York Daily News, as well as The Nation. Svitlana has also been featured in the Washington Post and quoted in the Irish Times and Brussels Times. We're honored to welcome Dr. Svitlana Romanko as our keynote speaker this morning. Svitlana, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shilpita, and everyone. I am so pleased and delighted to be here with you, and thank you for inviting me to join you today for this important event. Truly, Operation Noah has been the closest partner of mine when I've been working for Laudato Si movement, and even now we stay in a close connection because Operation Noah has supported us since the Russian invasion against our country began, and also signed on the statement, the Stand with Ukraine was among the first who offered their support and help and international solidarity. And I just wanted to acknowledge this and to extend my gratitude to everyone in Operation Noah and to you supporters, because it's your as well, it's your international solidarity, and we are so happy to have it as Ukrainians. So today I will bring a few points for us, and the first would be what we are doing currently to stop Russian military aggression against Ukraine and what we've done so far, and how this is interconnected to fossil fuel lobbyism and how Russian fossil fuels are funding the war against my country, and actually what we all can do towards especially the next investment announcement, which will be on July the 5th, which will just to dry out Putin's war chest and to financial flows that are still flowing to feed fossil fueled wars, war in my country and conflicts in other parts of the world, namely in Mozambique, in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Colombia, in Ecuador, in many countries in Asia. We have the same problem as these, and this problem is the financial flows and empowerment with them to fossil fuel industry to rage on the wars and conflicts against the peaceful people and citizens. So a fourth month already since the Russian military started its full-scale invasion of Ukraine has passed. And these months have witnessed war crimes, 11,000 just reported officially, atrocities and human suffering on a staggering scale. Besides the dreadful death, destruction, violence, terror and genocide against thousands of Ukrainians killed during shelling, bombing and missile attacks of Russian troops, the war has already affected 1.7 billion people in 107 countries who are now faced with the rising prices for food and energy and dramatically increased cost of living, as I know is a big case for the UK as well. Stand with Ukraine coalition that was launched by 45 Ukrainian organizations and networks is now supported by over 820 organizations in over 60 countries of the world, including the many countries in the global south, representing tens of millions of people. And Ukrainian government just also supported this campaign and started to express our call to action. And civil society have been clear in our calls to terminate all fossil fuel purchases, ban them, and ban all business with Russia's regime and with Russia's fossil fuel industry. For now, I envision Ukraine a peaceful country with a fully renewable and independent energy system that benefits all people. And I even envision many other countries in the world to be energy independent, safe and secure, and providing a just transition from fossil fuels to clean and renewable energy that does not kill. I see that Ukraine is rebuilt by ending fossil fuel addiction, and which helps to end this dependency all over the world. And to achieve this, we are putting pressure on governments and financial institutions to cut ties with fossil fuels. And people around the world are joining the global movement to end and divest from fossil fuels, especially as they learn how dirty energy has enabled the war against my country and other devastating conflicts around the world, and as they see impacts on the Ukrainian people. Stand with Ukraine coalition did a lot of active campaigning work in the last months. I will just name a few actions. We mobilized thousands and thousands starting from April 26, and we continue to mobilize against the main political moments, including upcoming J7 with the help of Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion and 350.org and other mobilizing movements. We also launched and delivered letters, petitions to the EU and national leaders, and targeted Putin's 100 biggest bankrollers, launched the petition Stop Fueling Putin's War that collected over 1 million of signatures, and sent open letters to the EU leaders before their meetings in Versailles, in EU Council meetings in March and April. And we targeted Germany and are going to target the UK in terms of some work with the traders and insurance companies. And in addition, on May 25th, campaign members filed a complaint with the European Ombudsman, arguing that the imports of Russian fossil fuels breach the EU law and violates international human rights, and many more. Recently, we just launched a letter to Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, asking them to make a huge boost for investments into renewable energy. But we all have to understand that these resources should be available and diverted from the fossil fuel industry at the same time. But when we look closely to the fossil fuel industry and lobby and its supporters, they are very hard at work ruthlessly spreading disinformation to capitalize on the invasion of Ukraine, to put for fossil fuel expansion under false pretenses. Their deceit would lead to further climate chaos and spiraling insecurity for communities around the world. There won't be peace in the world where Gazprom, Exxon, Total Energies, British Petroleum, Shell, and all the financial institutions supporting their activities are allowed to extract, transport, and burn fossil fuels. And besides concrete acts of solidarity, alongside call for sanctions, pushing for a just transition, building a world liberated from fossil fuels is how the climate movement can, outside of Ukraine, contribute to building peace globally. So just putting some spotlight on the Shell and Total as the main fossil fuel companies that are especially insisting on increasing exploration, and they try to replace the Russian fossil fuel companies with their market share for fossil fuels, which is unacceptable. This should not happen. So 30% of Shell's profit were connected to its activities in Russia, and Total Energies is refusing to stop its activities there and has hardly committed not to invest in new projects while continuing maintaining the shares that they have. I can name a few. For example, 19% of Novatek, a Russian oil company, 20% of Yamal gas field, 21% of the Arctic LNG, the second gas field, and many other shares, and 49% of Termokarstovo oil field. It's a huge assets, and they enabled the Putin regime to accumulate the resources it uses to fund the war against Ukraine. And Total Energy CEO, Patrick Pouyanné, you all know about him. He's very vocal in terms that the Total Energies absolutely can go without Russian gas. But I have here one question to the CEO and for them and for us. Can we all go with no peace in place in the world, globally, in my country? My answer is obviously no, but what would others respond? And I have this question particularly arising to ask all churches and the churches across England as well and the UK, because as far as I know that some churches are still maintain investments in Shell, Total Energies, and other fossil fuel companies here in the UK, and but they have to see clearly that this is a decisive point in the modern history. We can make the wrong turn back to fossil-fueled colonialism and keep fueling war in Ukraine and escalating the dreadful conflicts in African continent across the countries from Mozambique to Uganda and Tanzania, and invest the dirty money into Asian coal and instead of providing them with a just transition. But or we can properly start the green transition and divest to enable peace, inclusive economy and justice for all. And I want to pause here just before I will go to the next point, just call to the churches across England and across and diocese as well. We've been working with them a lot over the past year, and we see the important change that their divestment can make. For example, I will just name a few facts. Last year, when we had the largest ever divestment announcement in October, so we had divested 5.7 approximately billions of US dollars equivalent from fossil fuel industry. And the total price of coal embargo imposed on Russia will cost Russia 4 billion annually. So this is huge. We can make a difference by divesting our funds, and churches can make this difference and can make the appropriate moral and ethical choice not to fund the war in Ukraine anymore and to stay out of this just impossible violation. So, and purchases of Russian fossil fuel export are funding the war in Ukraine by also harming all creation. We have to acknowledge, and we have to remind this exactly now. And this is incompatible with our faith. We need to urgently divest from the fossil fuel industry. This is the most critical, crucial, and ethical choice we all have to make. And the urgency of that is being outstanding as well. We still have a date where we have date in July the 5th, where we all can, financial institutions, when we all can to speak to our diocese. Especially I encourage those who are listening us, the Operation Noah supporters and volunteers and partners, talk to your diocese, talk to Church of England, talk to another church institution and ask them to divest from Total Energies and from Russian fossil fuels, because that's essential to eliminate the existential threat to our, not only for Ukrainian people, but for our planet right now. And the time to act is now. And now I want to go very briefly to the point, which seems to be obvious from one side, because we've seen a lot of informational flows just telling us how the Putin's war machine in Ukraine has been funded, fed, and fueled by the coal, oil, and gas industries. But this is all true. I will just name a few numbers, which will also be available for you in the presentation format after the meeting to send over as a follow-up. Overall, oil and gas provide around 40% of the Russian federal budget revenue and make up approximately 60% of Russian export. And recently, the country finance minister, which just maybe a few weeks ago, he said that the country earnings from revenues from fossil fuel export will still be increased by 1 trillion of rubles, which is equivalent of 14 billion euros this year due to high prices and to speculation that fossil fuel companies are still trying to put in place, making enormous profits on the spiking prices on the energy and on the grief of Ukraine. I have to say this as well. And the part of the increase in revenue will be used to fund the war in Ukraine. They said this explicitly. There can't be more visible connections than this. And actually, continuing this, the latest data are telling us that 93 billion euros worth of fossil fuels were exported from Russia since the beginning of the war as of June 13th, due to official reports by the Center of Clean Energy and Air. And the EU bought 60% of Russian fossil fuel export, worth approximately 57 billion of euros. So we should understand that we absolutely have to ban all fossil fuel imports from Russia, and we have to seize all investments from Russian fossil fuels and infrastructure. And we actually have to deactivate the carbon bombs that, according to a newest report, Russia has in a number of 41 carbon bombs. These are new, huge oil and gas extraction fields, which, if implemented, will drive the climate past internationally agreed temperature limits and with catastrophic global impacts. And today's fossil fuels, unfortunately, have become a kind of a weapon of mass destruction. If we will let Russia profit on fossil fuels, they will also, sometime will be that they will even collide more profit on these carbon bombs perspective, which is absolutely impossible. As the IEA said, no new investments should be made since 2021 into oil, gas, and coal. We have to stop these investments now. These assets, they are saying this officially, will be stranded in less than 10 years. We don't need new gas infrastructure and LNG terminals. We don't need to replace the Russian fossil fuels with other fossil fuels from other parts of the world. We just need to phase them out and provide a just transition for us to a clean energy, which is very, 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 very important for us. And I have to acknowledge that there is some progress in this regard as well. And for example, the UK will phase out the imports of crude oil and oil products by the end of 2022. And UK has been a great ally of Ukraine in this fight. And I wanted to thank you to people of the UK helping our refugees and helping just providing some humanitarian help. But I also would like to encourage some governmental efforts, but not as increasing new offshore drilling. This I cannot say that's positive. This should be stopped, but I believe the government will be on the way to do that as well. So in Europe, finally, 19 European countries have announced increased ambition to decarbonize their economies. And 5 countries created new programs to improve house insulation and accelerate the deployment of heat pumps. Here it's very visible to me. If you divest from the fossil fuel industry, there is a very new but very profitable market emerging, which can benefit all people on the earth. This is a clean energy transition, and this is very important to know that your money, your funds can be serving much more better peaceful goal and the goal of justice. And my last point that I would like to make, how churches and dioceses can stand in support with Ukraine by joining the 5th July global divestment announcement. The import of all fossil fuels from Russia must be banned, as must any investment in Russia. But more broadly, we are looking for phase out fossil fuels globally if we are to stop the existential threat to our planet. And as a Ukrainian, it's very difficult for me to see that the planet-saving transition to clean energy might come finally at a cost that has been paid by my compatriots with their lives and the devastation of our country. But the fight for Ukraine's freedom can lead us to what science has told us we must do: stop burning oil, gas, and coal right now, and we have to stop all investments to feed this burning of coal, oil, and gas. And I have an important message for churches that are still investing in fossil fuel companies, such as Total and Shell, and I have and specifically to the Church of England, if I may, because I know that there was an amazing letter, very timely one, in the middle of March, sent to Total Energies in saying that they would, Church of England would reconsider their shareholding if Total did not exit Russia. But now it's mid-June, 2 months passed already, and after that, I will name a few facts from which you will see how much devastation and destruction the war brought on our territory. But the fact is that Total Energies still intends to buy gas from Russia, and the Church of England is still investing in Total Energies. Maybe with this message, they will be able to reconsider their shareholders' policy and their investment policy, and they will just try to find themselves on the right side of the history, because the old generation afterwards will keep their beliefs in that this step was absolutely right to do, to dry out financial flows, first to Total Energies to fund the destruction and conflicts, and implicitly to fund Russia, and to end the war in Ukraine. Just a few facts which I would like to end with. Thank you so much for your attention. But a few key facts that we discovered after the 3 months of war, they were absolutely scaring for me as well personally, because more than 14.5 million of Ukrainians have fled their homes, while tens of thousands of civilians, including about 500 of children, have been killed. And the Russian attacks completely destroyed some cities in the east and on the south, and atrocities uncovered in the territories that were under Russian occupation have all characteristics of a genocide and terrible violence on Ukrainian people. And after these 3 months of the full-scale war, damages are enormous. About 24,000 kilometers of roads, about 620 kindergartens, about 300 of bridges, 1,000 healthcare institutions and factories. And our GDP is expected to drop by, in general, 50% this year. And the cost of rebuilding the country after the war is estimated as $1 trillion, and thousands of hectares of ecosystems have already been destroyed. And here I am asking the questions to church institutions that probably are listening or will receive our message in the way. Do you think it's comparable with the faith that we hold in our hearts? And do you think it's comparable with the moral and ethical choice we are still having to make, especially based on the Vatican guidance on divestment, which calls us to divest from harmful industries as fossil fuels are as well? Just to end with that now is our chance to end fossil fuel conflict, poverty, and climate chaos. We need to end our fossil fuel addiction, and we need total embargo on all fossil fuels from Russia, of course, but at the same time, we should not replace these shale with some other fossil fuels, which will be exploited in some other territories, especially in the countries of Global South. No more investment into fossil fuels, no more fossil fuel expansion. We must accelerate the transition to clean energy now. And because the energy system is global, and it's the fossil fuels that are toxic. And as long as we've addicted to fossil fuels, we'll continue to empower regimes that oppress the citizens, initiate deadly conflicts, and pollute and deprive local communities. So I just encourage all of us to speak, to stand in solidarity with Ukraine, to take action in support of peace. Spread the word to your friends, your family, your leaders, your bankers, your diocese, your priests. It's time to end the era of bloody oil and gas and coal, and it's time to end and divest from fossil fuels as well. Thank you so much for your attention. I will be staying with you and happy to answer any question you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Svitlana, for your courage, hope, and sharing with us all the inspiring work that you're doing in the face of war and the suffering of our Ukrainian brothers and sisters. Thank you also for the challenge that you've put to us to love our global neighbors by calling for justice and end to fossil fuels and calling for peace. Just a reminder that if you do have questions for Svitlana, and you've got a lot to think through that inspiring talk, please pop them through in the chat and throughout the day. Svitlana will participate in our Q&A session a little bit later on. And next up, we have Bishop Manuel Ernesto. Thank you, Svitlana. And Reverend Manuel Ernesto, let me give a quick introduction before asking him to come and speak with us. Bishop Ernesto is the Anglican Bishop of Nampula in northern Mozambique, previously serving as suffragan Bishop of Diocese of Niassa. Bishop Manuel is the Liaison Bishop for Environment for the Anglican Church of Southern Africa and is known for encouraging the planting of trees at baptisms, new life for people, the church, and the land. Bishop Manuel has been outspoken about the ways in which the climate crisis is impacting the people of Mozambique, from violence where oil and gas prospecting is taking place to the increase in climate-related disasters. Bishop Manuel has been a strong advocate for divestment from fossil fuels and one of the main signatories of a 2021 resolution signed by over 20 Anglican bishops calling for an immediate halt to all new oil and gas developments on the continent of Africa. We are honored to welcome Bishop Manuel Ernesto to our supporters event this morning. So over to you, Bishop Manuel.
Now, thank you, Shilpita, for your generous introduction. And thank you, friends and fellow campaigners at Operation Noah. And it's a privilege to address you today from northern Mozambique, where I am now and serving the communities along the border with Tanzania. Allow me, first of all, to share a few things about Mozambique. Especially, I will start from the content of Mozambique, particularly northern Mozambique, and then we can go through what we are facing here, the challenges of climate change, but also the situations of the conflict in Cabo Delgado, in our diocese, which started right from the development and the narrative of fossil fuel in the region. And we can end by looking at alternatives for the situation that we are in here in northern Mozambique, and our appeal for the financial sectors and all of us to consider the moral implications of our investments and the effect that they have on our people here on the ground. So looking at the context of Mozambique, especially northern Mozambique, it's a very diverse region. We find here very diverse ethnic groups, cultural dynamics, and the religious groups. And we know that from the 15th century, Muslims and Christians have been living peaceful here in northern Mozambique. So we had our own grievances, but they were not to the magnitude that we are facing now, since the situations of prospecting to oil and gas started in 2017. So then we have the situations of the impact of climate change. We didn't know that the main driving factor of the environmental instabilities are related to global warming, but we just learned from the science, but also from the recent development, saying what we are facing here is not just a natural disaster, but it's a man-made part of the situation. So what we face here is the cyclical flood in northern Mozambique, and the cyclical cyclones. And just this year, we had 3 cyclones, and that the effects are still to be counted now. And the people are still looking at the ways to rebuild their houses. And the others are just living outdoors and displaced around the communities. Because the last cyclone was severe, especially for vulnerable people, because the rains lasted for almost a week, and then all constructions, the precarious constructions, collapsed, and the people are living just on their own. We know that the government is doing their best, but the challenges are just enormous. But the many situations we have here in northern Mozambique, especially the provinces of Cabo Delgado, is the epicenter of the situation, but we have also Nyasa, Nampula, down to Zambezia, is the situation of conflict that started right from the arrival of the multinational companies in the region. So there was an euphoria that the fossil oil company will bring development, and in fact they are doing their job, but the effect of the human face of the effect of what is happening is just enormous. So the situation started from 2012 with the arrivals of the quite old multinational companies. We are talking about the Nadarco from US, Shell, and then we have Italians, Eni, but many of them, they sold their shares to Total, and now Total is just operating in the region. So what then from 2017, the conflict started in northern Mozambique. Started right at the gas and prospection areas. Started as local clashes between non-identified actors, but it escalated in the open conflict. And now the reports are saying over 5,000 people are reported to be killed, and nearly 1 million people are displaced. And when we're talking about 1 million people displaced, these people are from the same region. they are living in the perimeters of 115 kilometers around the oil camps, which means from the same families, they have connections. So everyone is quite displaced in the region. So, and what we see is, in fact, the situation has a connection with the prospection of minerals and gas in the region, because we have never seen the violence that we are facing now. We are not blaming the investors directly, but we are saying that what is happening here is that when the development narratives started, expectations were people were expecting to get jobs. People were expecting to improve their lives, but especially young people were expecting to have their lives improved, getting jobs. But this is not the case. And what happened is that non-identified groups started recruiting young people, and some of them were using Muslim slogans and messages. But we know that the situation has nothing to do with religious communities, because Muslims and Christians are living together, and we are sharing the same space. So what is happening is just misuse of religions, and just for the situation that we face here. So above all, what we see here is the conflict has brought poverty, the local people, and but also we see that the investment in mining, the fossil oil, the companies, they are trying to help the community in terms of social responsibilities, but their response is very low. So the other thing that we see is there is an attempt of local people, members of the community, that try to regain their land, to have a space within the oil and the prospection region. It results in the clashes with the oil companies. That's why people, they prefer just to move away from the region. And the question is, if 1 million people are displaced in one tiny area, so what will happen to the land? Who will occupy the land after the conflict? So how people will return to their ancestral communities? So these are the questions that people, those who are still in Cabo Delgado or who are displaced in other provinces, are asking. So what will happen with the land? Then we see that the situation has weakened the security, and it created higher tensions with the poor people in the community, and it created a network of insurgents and the people who are exploiting the insecurity and the human insecurity in Cabo Delgado. So there has been confusing reports between the government side and the militia side in terms of who is causing the problem in the area. So the insurgents are blaming our government, and the government also are putting the blame on the other side. But what we see is there is a need of a dialogue. So we say the public, private, and community come together and they try to understand the what we call perceptions, because everyone is just speaking to its own side. But what we are appealing as faith communities, I know that our Muslim brothers and sisters, the Imam, the Sheikh, are working with us, and what we are appealing is for a dialogue, but also to see the human face of the conflict, how the conflict is just scattering the communities and the people in the area. In terms of the solutions, what are we proposing a way out for northern Mozambique? We have no ready-made solutions, but we are saying maybe if we stop blaming one another and they started taking all voices seriously. I'm talking about the communities. So what we hear is that for the investors and the policymakers, but what about the community voices? Are we hearing the people on the ground? Are we including the people on the ground? Are we taking the local communities as the stakeholders in our companies? So these are the questions that the communities are asking. So in terms of the response, we say we are calling our own churches and the faith communities to take a critical role. One, we are doing that in terms of a humanitarian response by hosting the displaced people, but also providing food and shelter and being part of the emergency teams. But we are saying it's not enough just to help people, but we need to ask the question, why the conflict? So we know that people are in need, but why people are in need in northern Mozambique, while the region is rich in terms of resources, but also we have investors that we were expecting that they would just help the communities. So in terms of, we are saying in faith communities, they have their own role, but not only faith community, but also the investors and the government and all of us, we needed to engage ourselves to respond to the situations we have. Now, the alternative in terms of the violence that we see in northern Mozambique, and we can't deny that the violence started right when we took the situation of extraction industries, and then we put it in the communities and the pure communities without preparing the community to be part of the process. So in terms of the alternatives, we are calling for ethical investment and the transition from centralized fossil fuel extraction to renewable energies, which are more decentralized and local communities can participate. And this can probably try to resolve the problem in northern Mozambique, because the fossil fuel companies, it is just a very small group. So the monopolies of a small group, and it's very difficult to participate on decisions. But in terms of renewable energies, solar energies, we know that the community can participate and everyone can be part of the process. The other situations we see is increased social and economical investment opportunities and access of livelihoods for local people. Northern Mozambique has been living by farming and the fisheries, but now we know that all fishery areas are just in war areas, and that no one can dare to go there for fishing. So if the oil companies or the government and all of us, we create alternatives for local people, for local economies, that can resolve the problem. But also, we are calling for a long-term commitment for social responsibilities on the part of the extraction companies. What is happening is that when the project is started, there are good plans and the promises of social responsibilities. But in just a few years, what happens is one investor sells the shares to another, and the one who comes has no responsibility for the people. And then that's what we are saying. We need a long-term social responsibility commitment for the companies to say for local, apart from resettlement, taking people from one side to another. We are calling for something more significant in terms of including local people to be part of the process. But also what we are calling is try to open a space for local actors to be part of the decision making. We know that religious leaders are coming together. We know that small-scale local investors are coming together. But what we are saying, we need to be part of the process, not just just to talk about the conflict, but to talk about the development of northern Mozambique, where people can regain their livelihood as it happened in the past. In terms of faith communities, the implications, especially for our partners in the Church of England, we are calling, in fact, for a courageous position in terms of connecting with oil companies. We know that investments are important, but human lives and the moral, our moral voice is more important than investments. We are pleased to hear that diocesan synods and governing bodies in the Church of England are now increasing their debates in terms of creating a balance in terms of where they can put their investment. Because investing only on the fossil fuel, it can be theological contradicting, because we are advocating for the care of the creation. We are worshiping a living God, and we are saying from the scriptures we know that we are a steward of the creation, but at the same time we are in the situation that we are investing in something that is creating let's say endangering what we are trying to protect. So we are saying that we need to be clear in terms of where we stand in terms of investment on that area. But also we are calling for our own local communities to engage our churches, engage our local interfaith networks to say, let's join hands in terms of advocating for this cause. Because if we don't do that now, it will be very difficult for the future generation to continue this dialogue. So I thank you all, and I look forward for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Manuel, for that inspiring talk and for sharing the on-the-ground experiences of your community. Thank you also for your call to the partners in the global church, as well as the Church of England, to have a more courageous position in dealing with oil companies, something hopefully we'll have a chance to discuss during the workshops, and the reminder that human lives are more important than financial investments. If you have any questions for Bishop Manuel, please put them in the chat for the question and answer session, as well as for Dr. Svitlana, which is coming up very soon. But now I'd finally like to introduce Reverend Dr. Rachel Mash, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us live today, but will be speaking to us via a pre-recorded video. Reverend Dr. Rachel Mash is the Environmental Coordinator for the Anglican Church of Southern Africa and runs Green Anglicans, which works with Anglicans across Africa and the world to address the climate and nature crises. Rachel has a PhD in family medicine and a master's in theology, both from the Stellenbosch University in South Africa, as well as a postgraduate degree from the University of Edinburgh. In 2021, Rachel received the Cross of St. Augustine from the Archbishop of Canterbury for her services to the Anglican Communion and for addressing the Anglican Communion's 5th mark of mission. which is to safeguard the integrity of creation. Rachel continues to partner with Operation Noah on our global divestment announcements. And in January of this year, she wrote an article with our Bright Now campaign director, James Buchanan, that appeared in the Church Times. In the article, Rachel called on the Church of England to stop faith washing fossil fuel companies and to divest from all fossil fuels. So we'll now hear from Dr. Rachel Mash in the pre-recorded video that our campaign director, James Buchanan, will share.
Okay, so I hope you can all see this okay. And I hope you're going to be able to hear it okay as well. Okay.
Greetings from Cape Town in South Africa. My name is Revd Rachel Mash and I am the Environmental Coordinator for the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. So I would just like to share my screen. Just before Easter in Durban, in the north part of South Africa, we had terrible flooding and almost 500 people died. Some of their bodies have still not been recovered. One family lost 9 family members as their home was washed away in the incredible flooding. Why did such flooding take place? We know that 93% of the extra heat which is created by man-made human global warming pollution goes into the ocean. And so as the oceans heat up, we are seeing more and more intense storms. We're seeing an increase in hurricanes, which are impacting on the poorest of the poor. At the same time, in the Horn of Africa, they are facing the worst drought in 40 years. And 20 million people are faced with hunger and mass starvation. And yet most of the world does not listen and does not hear because their eyes are turned to the Ukraine. Africa is being impacted by climate change. And now, because of the war in Ukraine, eyes are being turned to Africa. Can Africa be Europe's next gas station? Will there be a scramble for non-Russian oil and gas? Will this bring prosperity and hope to Africa? Across Africa, oil is known as the curse. Many African countries that are richly endowed with natural resources are also among the poorest. For instance, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, Angola, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. African countries with large natural resources are often categorized by large inequalities in income, and many of these countries have been marked by costly civil wars, fueled by the desire to control these resources. Africa is now being targeted by fossil fuel companies for the last gold rush of oil and gas explorations. Companies such as Total, Shell, ExxonMobil are targeting gas in Africa as a way to keep their investors happy by reducing their carbon emissions from oil as they turn to gas, instead of investing in renewable energy projects. Massive gas deposits have been found in Mozambique, Tanzania, Senegal. There are plans afoot to build a 1,400-kilometer-long heated oil pipeline from Uganda to Tanzania, known as the East Africa Crude Oil Pipeline. What we see is hyped-up promises. Oil companies promise vast profits and prosperity, but the reality is they leave pollution and political upheaval. They promise unrealistic timescales, and then governments stop investing in rural development, believing that everybody will become wealthy by this trickle-down from this massive bonanza. For example, the discovery of the second largest gas reserve in Africa in 2010 led the political and business elite to believe that Mozambique would become like Abu Dhabi or Qatar or Kuwait, and they stopped investing in the north of the country. Bishop Ernesto will share more of the violence that this has led to. And then people are forced off their land. Typically in rural areas, people do not have a documentation proving that the land is theirs. The land might be in the ownership of a tribal entity or a governor, and so it's very easy for the oil companies to negotiate, to offer incentives such as bursaries, and even bribes to those who control the land but don't live off it. Often the affected people are indigenous people, or they're from a different ethnic group to the elites in the city, and their rights are trampled upon. For example, the United Nations guaranteed rights of the San people are being ignored in northern Namibia, where Recon Africa has started exploratory drilling. And it is estimated that as many as 14,000 families will lose their land so that the East Africa crude oil pipeline can be built. Here is Andreas Hawano in northern Namibia, who's pointing out the area which used to be his home, his homestead, and his mango farm. This leads to political instability. As the development begins to take off, political elites from the major cities benefit. Jobs are created for the educated and for foreigners. Local communities are left out of decision-making and do not benefit from the developments. They are pushed off the land and unable to fish as waters become polluted. Young people become disillusioned and are easily recruited into extremist groups. For instance, in Nigeria, the oil area of the Delta has become a militarized zone. Struggle for oil wealth has fueled violence between ethnic groups in the Nigerian Delta, causing the militarization of nearly the entire region by ethnic militia groups. We also see an increase in gender-based violence. Rural women tend to be the smallholders and they feed the family. Once they lose access to land, they are very unlikely to be employed by the oil company. There's also a risk of increase of risky sexual behavior and gender-based violence, as huge numbers of single male oil workers flood the area. And let us not forget the violence which is done to other creatures. The people of South Africa have just stopped Shell from seismic blasting. And one of these reasons was because of the impact on whales and other marine species. Seismic blasting can damage their hearing, their ability to communicate. Imagine you communicate by radar and then you hear this blasting. It disrupts their diving behavior, their feeding and migration patterns. And there are increasing indications that this can cause serious injury to whales. It may also disrupt reproductive success and increase the risk of strandings and ice entrapments. On land, the same danger is faced by migration routes, for instance, of elephants, and that's one of the dangers of the exploratory drilling taking place at the moment in northern Namibia. What are the other options apart from oil and gas? Namibia has just announced a $9.4 billion green hydrogen investment. Hydrogen that will be made purely from solar energy, creating jobs, creating hope for Namibia. In the north of Africa, in Morocco, there is the Noah Solar Complex. This project is the largest solar power generation unit in Africa, and is still the largest concentrated solar power project in the world. Africa can transition to renewable energy. Deuteronomy 30 verse 19 says this, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you today. I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live. It is ours to choose. Will we continue investing in fossil fuel that fuels violence, environmental degradation and climate change? Or will we invest our pension schemes, our church money, our diocesan money in renewables? Let us choose life.
Well, thanks, James, for sharing. I hope you all found that inspiring and thought-provoking. I myself am always struck by Rachel's heartfelt and clear message with a call to action for us to consider, and how both the climate as well as the biodiversity crises are being fueled by our choices, as well as the stories of hope and alternatives like Namibia and Morocco's investments in renewable power, which show that that is another way we can choose. We're now going to have a Q&A session with Dr. Svitlana and Bishop Manuel. Thank you very much for sending over your insightful questions over. And I'll start with a first question for Svitlana. So here goes, let me read it out. The EU leaders and others would say that they agree with your call to transition to new energy sources and to ban Russian fossil fuels, but this cannot be done overnight. What would you say to such leaders?
I would say them a few points. The first one is, yes, of course, this cannot be done overnight, but this is not that we are asking for immediately just to switch off the tap, and Russian tap in particular. So we do understand that it takes some time, but not the times that the EU leaders are trying to persuade all others it will take. Because the latest report I've seen shows us that up to 2025, the EU can be completely independent and renewable energy powered with no further purchases of oil, gas, and coal, not only from Russia, but also from other countries, as we've thought about African countries and others. So I encourage those leaders to think and go beyond of the just straightforward arguments that we cannot do it overnight, so then we can take our time and not be in a hurry at all, not be in a rush at all. No, you have to, and we've made a few very explicit demands, because as Bishop said, that Nampula said, that it's true that we are losing people's life all the time, and we should first of all dismantle this economic system, including in the EU, that enables to put profits over human lives. This is absolutely obvious for me as well. So over the last weeks, I've been having informal conversations with some EU political leaders, and what I see, including with the EU Taxonomy Delegated Act, which we know that will intend to include gas and nuclear as a sustainable, and label these investments as green for some more years. So the leaders are a bit reluctant and not relying well on their economies, because there is no need in new investments into gas, into nuclear, and of course into oil and gas. And we cannot do business as usual and try to extend the fossil fuel era and their exploration as much as we can. We've seen it with the example of the embargo imposed. It will be fully enforced until the end of this year, but it's not the reason to increase buying Russian oil and gas overnight, as many of them did, for example, as Belgium did, as France did. And we have the latest report released on June 16 that proves that some importers, yes, Germany lost leading position in consuming Russian gas, but they are leading economy, a major economy of the European Union. And we have to just demand more that the governments can offer, and that's why we are just trying to push with the campaign demands on a full ban on oil, gas, and coal immediately, and as an imperative not to replace it countries. So basically, and what we need to that, it's also obvious, we need to triple our investments into renewable energy, into clean energy, as said, which will be distributed, community-owned. And as Dr. Rachel Mash said, I completely agree with her, said, and there is a fossil fuel exit report strategies that says that the world already has enough of renewable energy potential, and we just need to invest into some areas as African continent and as the EU countries, as other countries in Asia cut these investments led to Asia for coal and oil, but just replace them with the green investments. This would be a major step we have to demand from the EU. And the last point, I will just again provide one number which sounds really inappropriate to me when the EU is trying to take advantage again of continuing using oil and gas to keep the economy competitive. I will just say one new number that for Germany, for example, because I've been discovering these numbers, the GDP decline will be starting from 1.6 to maximum 6% annually, which is not a huge number. And what we see happening in the world, this destruction, if assessed, it will create much, much more damage and loss that we even can imagine, in comparison with the major EU economists that just simply would like to keep their competitiveness on. Encourage all of us to speak again to the governments, especially in the countries where people are based, and we mobilize a lot of young people speaking to them, just try to repower EU strategy with 69% grow into renewables, and just try to explore new areas in Mozambique, in African continent, and just keep the reputation that you are a leader of green transformation. It's not what can happen. And for that, we need to, of course, triple our investments into renewable energy.
Thank you so much, Svitlana. And now turning over to a question for Bishop Manuel. This summer, bishops from across the Anglican Communion will come to the UK for the Lambeth Conference. What are your hopes for the Lambeth Conference, especially with regard to the environment and the climate crisis?
No, thank you. It is a good question. We will be gathering in Canterbury in July for the bishops' conference, and so environment is one of the themes that we are bringing to Lambeth, and we have our groups working across the communion in the provinces. Our hope, our prayers, hope, and commitment is that the bishops and the spouses representing their provinces and the dioceses will just back what the environmentalists are saying in terms of protecting our planet. And especially, we know that we have investments in the companies. I think the conference and will encourage the church to invest ethical in terms of where we put our money, but the special come with a clear theology in terms of a theology that is focused on environment. Because, as I said, what we see now, it is a contradiction in terms of the theologies. How do we find a theology that will once again remind the people that we are stewards of the creation, and we are the guardians of this planet? And I think we will be encouraging bishops, and I know that Archbishop Justin and the team is working hard and putting an agenda for that. And definitely environment will be one of the themes that the bishops will discuss, and then find a way. The conference has no mandate to oblige the churches to do A and C, but they have a moral mandate to call for the global church to say, this is the way that we want to see. This is the future that we want for our children. And I think that the message will be heard and taken to the dioceses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Manuel, for that. We're running short on time, so perhaps if I just request you both to keep an answer to this last question to 60 seconds. If there's one action you would encourage us to take, especially moving forward from the supporters event, what would it be? Bishop Manuel, if you would like to start, and over to you then, Svitlana. To 60 seconds, one action.
Now, thank you once again. I think one action I see is please keep investing on communication. Because what we see is there is extremely lack of understanding of the situation. Imagine, for example, I wonder if I could, taking the decision makers in Paris, in London, in New York, in Brussels, and bring all of them to Cabo Delgado to see what is happening on the ground. I think the idea of to say we can change overnight, it will be just refuted on that situation. So communication is the key, and then leaders to see what is happening in the communities, but also community voices to be raised to the decision makers on the top. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Manuel. Svitlana?
I would say the sooner we replace fossil fuels with clean, affordable, and distributed community-owned renewable energy and investments into this community-owned clean energy, the sooner we all can live in peace. But of course, I would encourage everyone to take the action on the level they can take as an individuals, just to consume less resources that.
I'm sorry, Svitlana, we have you on mute. Sorry, Svitlana, we're still unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So the sooner we can replace the fossil fuels, dirty fossil fuels, and investments into them that are still being under maintenance, with the clean, affordable, and the community-owned renewable energies, the sooner we all can live in peace. And the more lives we will be able to save all together if we will just do one step that we can do today on our individual level, on our political action level, or on our church level, and just trying to encourage every action on every of these levels. And I am truly want us to do this step today and whatever we can. So, and hopefully to see you soon in some time when we will be able to see that the clean energy saves the world literally, and we will be able not to switch to it overnight, but to do it in the most fast and rapid manner we could. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Svitlana, and thank you so much to Bishop Manuel and Dr. Rachel Mash for your time, for all the work you're doing on the ground, and your support for us at Operation Noah. You're a true inspiration for us and the team, for those on the call, and we very much hope that we can take some of these and put them into practice and action in the days ahead. See, I'll now like to hand over to James Buchanan, our Bright Now Team Campaigns Director, as well as the rest of the team, to present an update on our work.
Thank you, Shilpita, and great to see so many of you this morning. Thanks so much to Svitlana and to Bishop Manuel, and obviously to Rachel Mash as well for your inspirational talks. We're just giving us a lot of encouragement for the work that we're doing here in the UK. So I'm just going to briefly share my screen and give a quick overview about our Bright Now campaign and some of the changes in the last year, and then I'm going to hand over again to some of my Bright Now colleagues who will give very quick 2-minute overviews of our different areas of work. So towards the end of last year, we at Operation Noah received some grant funding to kind of expand the scope of our Bright Now campaign. As I'm sure many of you who are on this call will know, we've been campaigning for churches to divest from fossil fuel companies for quite a number of years. We've also been encouraging churches to invest in climate solutions, although I think it's fair to say that we didn't really have a great deal of capacity or resources in order to do that. And so this grant funding that we've received has enabled us to recruit new staff members. Julia Corcoran, who you'll hear from in a moment, who's focusing on investment in climate solutions such as renewable energy, and Sharon Hall, who's leading our work on church land use, and she will share a little bit more about that in a moment as well. Also to say, earlier, just in the last couple of months, at Operation Noah, we were shortlisted for a National Campaigner Award, the Sheila McKechnie Foundation, which supports organisations in the UK who are campaigning for change, organisations and individuals. And we were shortlisted. We were a runner-up for the David and Goliath Award. So really just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you, our supporters, for your support of our work. It's really thanks to you and to your campaigning efforts in your churches that we're able to do what we do. So thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to hand over to Bakani, who's going to share a little bit about our work on fossil fuel divestment.
Good morning, and I was just going to ask James to continue to share your screen if that's all right. I think it might be easier there. And yes, just to repeat James's thanks to all of you who have really helped to amplify the work that we're doing and have been part of our key and major successes this year in the last 12 months. Key amongst which was our record global divestment announcement last year, just ahead of COP26. So we mobilized 72 faith institutions to divest, and we were really proud that this message could send a clear note to all the leaders gathered in Scotland last year that faith institutions really wanted to see a movement away from fossil fuels. And thanks to Lana, who we worked with closely on that announcement, and thank you for your support. We saw last year a really big movement in terms of churches in the UK divesting, and we were proud to see the Methodist Church, movements in the Church of Scotland and the Church of Wales divesting fully. What was really exciting was that churches finally realizing we have run out of time and patience to be waiting for other strategies of engaging with fossil fuel companies and saying enough is enough. What we need to do now is start to focus on renewable energy. So this really meant that most churches in the UK have now actually made those divestment commitments. And what we're pushing for is the two biggest churches in the UK to start to make those changes. But again, even with those, we have started to see some changes. So, for example, in the Church of England, where we had no diocese divesting, we now have 10 dioceses have now made full divestment commitments. So that is to say, they have begun the processes of selling off any shares in fossil fuels and committing to never invest in them again. So what we see in this graphic is those dioceses that are now have no fossil fuel investments, but have not made any commitments not to go back into that industry in the future, and those in red, which continue to hold fossil fuel investments. And what we would like to encourage our supporters in those dioceses or in nearby dioceses is to start to have your local churches become part of these divestment movements. And I'll come to the global divestment announcement that was mentioned earlier by Lana as well. And in the Catholic Church, we've seen that 9 dioceses have also divested. And again, we know that the ones in red are continuing to hold fossil fuel investments. And as we've seen that in this particular year, where from our speakers today, you've heard very clearly that we cannot continue to hold fossil fuels. It's no longer, it hasn't been for a long time, a moral decision, but we now know the direct link between conflict and violence and fossil fuels. And so this year we're encouraging more faith organizations to take this prophetic step of joining together with other institutions from around the world to say we are moving away from fossil fuels and we want there to be no new fossil fuel divestments. And this is a really clear message that churches can be part of. So if you would be interested in helping your local church, even if you don't have any investments, this sends a clear message to say, if we ever have investments in the future, they will not be in fossil fuels. Please do email me. And if you want to say, as a diocese, we want to see no future fossil fuel developments in the UK or indeed around the world, you can send that clear message with this new divestment announcement. So please do email me at wakani.chitsi@operationnoa.org, and I'll share my email just now. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, James and Wakani, and thanks a lot to the rest of the Right Now team, Julia and Sharon as well, who've been working hard behind the scenes.
Shilpita, I think Julia was going to share something on the investment side as well, briefly.
Oh, amazing! Thank you so much.
And Sharon.
That would be great. Thanks, Julia. Over to you.
Great, thank you. So as James said, this is a kind of a newish area of work for us at Operation Noah, and we've become more dedicated in it. And the UN and the International Energy Agency said that there's a need for investment in clean energy, and that if we are going to reach net zero by 2050 and limit global heating to 1.5%, that we need to treble the investments in renewable energy to $4 trillion a year. So this is clearly some key work that needs to happen. So we're working with all UK church denominations at national and regional level to encourage an increase in investments in climate solutions, such as renewable energy. And there's some great examples already of some churches doing it, such as the Diocese of Truro, and they have invested nearly 2 million in infrastructure funds. So they're directly investing in renewable energy. And if you come to the workshop, we'll have a video of Bishop Hugh Nelson talking a bit more about that. And so going forward in this work, we are creating a report so that churches can see the importance of this, and we're hoping to launch that in the autumn term alongside a webinar. And from that, we are hoping to create a new pledge with our partners that we're working alongside, such as Faith Invest and the Catholic Investment Institute Collaborative. And so we are working on this and hoping to have some global investment announcements by the end of the year. I will now hand over to my colleague Sharon, who's going to talk a bit about our work in land use.
Hi, I'm Sharon Hall. I'm the campaign officer for Right Now with the main focus on church land use. Our new campaign strand on church land use recognises that land can be a source of greenhouse gas emissions, but it can also be a carbon sink. So we've got a particular focus on the Church of England, who have major land holdings, but we hope that our research and resources will be helpful more widely as well. Our main campaign priorities in this area are for church landowners to grow more trees. It needs to be the right trees in the right places at the right time, to also protect peatland, identify, protect and restore peatland, which is a major source of carbon emissions when it's in a degraded state, but can be a really positive carbon sink when it's more healthy. And then also to reduce farm emissions, supporting farmers to conduct carbon audits and making changes. There's going to be much more information coming soon. There's already a detailed blog on the Bright Now website with lots of useful information for churches about growing trees. So do check that out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia and Sharon, and sorry about that. Thanks, yes, again, to James, Wakani, Julia, Sharon, our amazing Right Now team, who've been doing such important work over the last few months. And I'd now like to introduce Nikki Bull, an Operation Noah trustee. Nikki will briefly talk about some of Operation Noah's other initiatives, following which we'll take a short break. Nikki, over to you.
Thanks, Shilpita. Operation Noah has been very busy over the past 12 months. In addition to the Bright Now campaign, our trustees and staff members continue to speak at churches, events and conferences about our work and about the importance of Christians taking action on the climate crisis. If you would like one of our trustees or staff members to speak at your church or event, please do get in touch. And if you plan to be at the Greenbelt Festival over the August bank holiday weekend, please come and say hello. Operation Noah will be at this year's Greenbelt and would love to meet you. We're also really proud of the fact that before COP26, over 2,200 churches from around the UK held a Climate Sunday service, with many of those churches not only holding a service, but also lobbying the government for stronger action on the climate crisis, as well as joining a church greening scheme such as Eco Church. Climate Sunday was started by Operation Noah and was supported by nearly every denomination and large Christian charity in the country. And thousands of people heard, some for the first time, in church, how as Christians our faith is deeply connected to how we treat the planet. Churches can still run a Climate Sunday service. There are resources, prayers, liturgies and service plans available on the website at climatesunday.org. In fact, at least one church we know of has now run 2 Climate Sunday services, and it's planning to run a 3rd service in the autumn this year. Operation Noah has also been involved in rallying church leaders to speak out about the climate crisis and to lobby the UK government to stop all new fossil fuel developments. In March, Operation Noah helped organise a letter from over 500 UK church leaders, including 68 Anglican and Catholic bishops, calling on the government to stop all new oil and gas developments. We believe this was the first time a public statement has been made by so many UK church leaders on the future of oil and gas. We've also formed new partnerships over the past year. Operation Noah is an official supporter of the Stop Cambo, Stop Jackdaw campaign, which is working to stop all new North Sea fossil fuel developments. The United Nations and the International Energy Authority have been clear that we can have no new fossil fuel developments anywhere in the world if we hope to keep global heating, average global heating increases to 1.5 degrees centigrade. So we see the Stop Cambo, Stop Jackdaw campaign as absolutely crucial. And we've been working with church leaders to get the message out that we can't afford more new North Sea oil and gas. In fact, scientists say we can't even safely burn oil and gas from existing developments. In addition to this Stop Cambo campaign, we've continued to strengthen our partnership with Green Anglicans, Green Faith, the World Council of Churches and the Laudato Si movement. And we partnered this year with the Young Christian Climate Network on a divestment prayer vigil outside the Church of England's Church House. That's just a very brief overview of some of the things we've been doing. So now back to you, Shilpita.
Thank you. And we're nearly finished, but we'd like to end with Cameron Conan, an Operation Noah trustee. Cameron's also Operation Noah's communications officer, and Cameron will like to tell you how you can support Operation Noah. Cameron will be followed by Reverend Daryl Hanna, the chair of Operation Noah's Board of Trustees, who will close this time in prayer. So over to you, Cameron.
Great. Thank you, Shilpita, and thank you everyone for being at this supporters event. I hope you found it really helpful. I hope we've given you a sense of the role that Operation Noah plays in creating change and inspiring the church to take action on the climate crisis. I'm going to ask my colleagues, whether that be Bakani or James or someone else, to put in the chat right now the link where you can go to support us on our website, and you can make a financial donation if you don't already support us on an ongoing basis, or you feel inspired today by what you've seen that you might think, oh, actually, I'll make a one-off gift, or I might even want to become a regular supporter of Operation Noah. We'll put the link in the chat for you to be able to do that. As James mentioned earlier, you know, this year we're nominated for a national campaigning award for our Bright Now campaign, the David and Goliath Award, which I think is an acknowledgement of our success in taking on much bigger groups and causes. You know, with a small staff, really, Operation Noah is creating change, not just around the UK, but I'd go so far as to say from around the world. From Climate Sunday to our global divestment announcements, we've shown that when the church takes action, the world changes. And we feel we've just begun to do that. We're now pushing into impact investing, getting churches to focus more on where they're and how they can make positive investments in the environment. And we're ramping up other work in terms of trying to stop fossil fuels in the UK and elsewhere. We just, again, want to thank those of you who have supported our work over the years. We're really privileged to have you as partners in this work, and we hope you feel a part of that work today. I also want to say, we'll put in the chat as well, if one of my colleagues could do this, that you could sign up for our newsletter. If you don't already receive our monthly newsletter, that's a great way to keep up with what we're doing every month. And yeah, so I invite you to do that as well. So thank you again. I'd now like to hand over for closing prayer to Revd Dr. Daryl Hannah, our Chair of Trustees. Daryl?
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm just going to ask us all to first, in a moment of silence, hold before God the people of Ukraine and all the victims of this war, which is caused, at least in part, by human greed for fossil fuels. And now I ask you to hold before God the people of Africa, especially the people of Mozambique, who are suffering because of human greed and the greed of the oil and gas companies. And now I ask you that we who live in the affluent West would find ways to quickly wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. And that there would be no new fossil fuel developments in the United Kingdom. Almighty God, give us all the reverence for the earth as your creation, that we may use its resources rightly in the service of others and to your honor and glory. This we pray through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Thank you so much, Daryl, for that lovely prayer. And thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you will continue to support us. And if you didn't already receive it, please do sign up to our monthly email newsletter. The link to sign up's already, I can see in the chat, and do follow us on our website or Twitter. And we do hope that you'll keep in touch over the course of the year ahead. Thank you very much and have a good rest of the day.